also that Joel was being subdued inside. That's what he told me.
Yes.
That's the information you had as you and your partner approached the side kitchen door.
Yes.
And there was some discussion about the dog, or whether there was a dog. He told you it was a little dog, and you opened the door and see Mr. Mattioli, as you've described it, on top of the person you later learned was Mr. Acevedo. Is that right?
Correct.
All right. What you say and what we hear to Mr. Mattioli is he breathing? Or he's breathing, ain't he? Or words to that effect, yes?
Correct.
And what you hear in response is, I don't know, but then you left out the last part of that response, handcuff this guy. That's what Mr. Mattioli said to you in response, yes?
Yes.
And you heard that on your body cam?
Yes.
And you remember him saying that to you?
After a review of my body camera footage, yes.
I'm sorry, say that again.
After review of my body camera footage, yes.
Yes. So at least for Mr. Mattioli's purposes, now that law enforcement was there, he was interested in having Mr. Acevedo cuffed. That's what he said.
That is what he said.
All right. And you make observations about Mr. Mattioli's position on top of Mr. Acevedo, yes?
Yes.
And is it your opinion today and testimony that when you say you believed he was chest to back, that is, Mr. Mattioli's full weight was on Mr. Acevedo's back?
I can't say for sure if it was his full weight. From my perception, from what I saw, it appeared to me as if he was laying on him chest to back.
All right. Have you looked at the still photographs at all of that morning?
I have not.
And you can't tell us for certain whether Mr. Mattioli's legs were anchored on the floor, actually on the floor of his kitchen, while on Mr. Acevedo's back? Do you know that or not?
Not to my recollection.
Not to your recollection. All right. And with respect to Mr. Acevedo, the position in Mr. Acevedo's arms, did you see that they were on the ground as if he were pushing up, for lack of a better term?
I can't say that I saw that. It appeared that
What's your recollection of where Mr. Acevedo's arms were when you walked into the kitchen?
I honestly don't have a recollection of where his arms were.
Would that have mattered to you in assessing the situation?
Of where his arms were placed?
Yeah, whether his arms were underneath him, for instance?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Is it, would I have done something differently?
Or would you have had a different impression about what was going on if the subject who you were concerned about had his arms out to the side or whether they were underneath him?
No, I don't think I would have had a different concern.
All right. What you say is that you observed Mr. Mattioli's right arm underneath Mr. Acevedo's neck, that's what you said, and his left arm above him. Is that right?
That is the way it appeared to me.
I'm sorry.
That is the way that it appeared. Okay, so above him in what fashion?
Well, I just wrote down what you said. His left arm was above him. That's what you said on direct.
Okay, so what I saw when I walked in was not his arm raised up, if that's what you're asking.
Well, I'm just using your words. Why don't you tell us what you mean? When you said his left arm was above him, what did you mean? I understand you don't mean his arm was up here, but.
Okay, so what I mean is in a fashion like this.
Did you see?
His hand would have been above. What it appeared to be to me was his right arm was underneath him, underneath his throat, neck, and his other arm was up here. That's what I mean by above. It wasn't, I don't recall it being flat out.
Just so the record's clear, when you say up here with your left arm, you're bending it at the elbow and you are motioning as if
Is it a 90-degree angle?
90-degree angle?
Or approximately a 90 degree.
Yes, and is your recollection that Mr. Mattioli's right hand was holding his left arm or left bicep? Is that what you're telling me?
I would say that's reasonably accurate. It appeared to me to be like this.
That's what you believe you saw, and that's what you reported to your supervisor, correct?
That is what I reported to investigators, yes.
That it appeared to you upon entering the kitchen that Mr. Mattioli had Mr. Acevedo in a rear naked chokehold, which would cut off the air from his throat to his brain. That was your concern.
I'm sorry, I don't know how you mean my concern. When I was explaining what I believed I saw, are you asking me if I was concerned that that is what he had done? He had cut off the air to his brain?
Well, why would you care if that wasn't your concern? Unless he was hurting the man, why would you make the observation at all? That's what you were worried about, that he was cutting off the air supply to Mr. Acevedo. You were worried about that.
In walking in and examining what I saw, I attempted to ascertain the level to which he was subdued, as I had been told. Yes, I would be concerned if anybody was being held in a position that I believed I saw that day and reported to investigators that I saw that day, that their ability to breathe would be hindered.
Compromised.
Yes.
Yes. And so up the chain it went, rear naked choke, you told an investigator and a supervisor, and that's how the narrative of what happened to Joel Acevedo on the morning of April 19th was generated. Your observation that what you believe you saw was a rear naked choke applied on Mr. Acevedo by Mr. Mattioli, correct?
Is that your question to me? Is that how the narrative was generated?
Yes.
I wouldn't necessarily be able to answer that question. I wasn't a part of narrative construction. What I did was report to and speak with the investigators who asked me questions and described what I believed I saw that day.
All right, let me ask you this. Do you now know that there was no damage to Mr. Acevedo's neck? Do you know that?
The only information that I have regarding the damage to Mr. Acevedo's neck is I believe it was a clip from opening arguments that I saw on the news, and I believe somebody said that there wasn't damage to his neck. I don't remember who in that video.
Since you've left the force, or even since this event, have you followed the media coverage of this case?
No, not particularly. There was a large gap in time before I looked back into it. I was aware that, I was made aware conversationally through other people that there had been issues with a medical examiner. I'm not sure to what the extent those issues were, and that there had been conversations about the release of body camera footage.
Are you aware that it's been reported regularly that this was the Mattioli chokehold case, or words to that effect?
I have not heard that term, no.
Do you think, if you have an opinion at all, that narrative, that this is the Mattioli chokehold case, is the product of this observation that you made upon being interviewed about what you believe you observed when you walked in the house that morning?
Objection, relevance. Overruled.
Can you repeat the question, please?
You believe, if you have an opinion at all, that the description of this case as being the Mattioli chokehold case is the product of your description of what you believe you saw when you entered the home that morning?
I suppose I don't have an opinion. There's no way in my estimation for me to know if my description of events is what caused other people to label it in such a fashion.
You will concede that you could not tell if Mr. Mattioli was actually applying pressure to Mr. Acevedo and his neck when you entered the home.
Correct.
Have you ever spoken to your partner, Officer Shermanata, about what you believe you observed when you came to the scene?
On scene, I had conversations with Officer Shermetta.
Yeah,
Regarding
those would.
what we saw there.
I'm sorry.
I said regarding the call that we responded to, we spoke about things that happened on scene.
Okay, that would be depicted on your body cam, yes.
I believe part of the conversation was our conversation was captured on body camera.
As you think back upon it, are you able to recall whether you had any discussion with him about your concern about what you believed you saw vis-a-vis the neck of Mr. Acevedo being compromised with your partner?
To my recollection, after reviewing my body camera footage, me and Officer Shermetta had an exchange where he asked me, essentially paraphrasing, was his arm around his neck? And I responded, yeah.
You said yes.
I responded in the affirmative. I don't remember the exact word that I used.
That you believed his right arm was underneath his neck or around his neck, or?
We didn't specifically say what arm. He just said, it was to paraphrase, was to say, he asked, was his arm around his neck? And I responded in the affirmative.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tiffin?
No.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Roach, you can step down.
You solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God, or under the pain and penalty of perjury? You may be seated, and please state and spell your name for the record.
Eric DeFord.
Could you spell your name, please, sir?
Oh, DeFord, D-E-F-O-R-D.
Thank you. Mr. Tiffin?
You are currently employed by the Milwaukee Fire Department, correct?
Yes, sir.
And your current rank is what?
Lieutenant,
And you've held the rank of lieutenant for how long?
since March of this year.
Prior to that, what was your rank in the fire department?
I held the rank of firefighter and HEO, which is heavy equipment operator.
Your job as a firefighter and a heavy equipment operator obviously involves fighting fires, correct?
Yes, sir.
What else?
Also providing medical assistance to patients and victims.
On the morning of April 19th of 2020, you were working at which house, which station?
Engine 33,
And where is that?
45th and Burnham.
That morning, did your house, your station, receive a notification of respiratory stress at 4502 West Cleveland?
From what I recall, or from what I can recall, yes.
Approximately what time, if you recall?
That I do not recall.
You responded to that, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you were the one of those people who responded, correct?
Yes, sir.
So the call comes in, let me ask this. How is the fire department, how are fire employees, firefighters notified that medical attention is needed? What's the process?
If it's for medical assistance, the tones go off in the firehouse. It states what the problem is. It could be trouble with breathing, depending on what the victim's having trouble with. And then gives the address, and then we get onto the engine and we respond.
To your recollection, were your engine, the first medical responders to that location?
We were the first MFD unit on scene, yes.
MFD, Milwaukee Fire Department?
Yes,
There were squad cars there at that time, is that correct?
from what I recall, yes.
Upon arriving, what did you do?
Upon arriving, I grabbed our medical bags, our medical equipment that we take in, walked up to the house that the address came in for, walked into the door, and there we saw the victim.
You walk in, and what do you see going on with respect to the victim?
Walk in, I see the victim lying there, unresponsive, check for a pulse, no pulse, CPR was started.
When you walked in, was CPR being administered by anybody at that point?
At the time before getting here and looking at the report, I didn't remember that, but then looking at the report, it says CPR was initiated before our arrival.
By whom?
Police, MPD.
Basically, when the fire department arrives, it becomes your responsibility to take over and provide medical treatment. Is that correct?
Yes.
The victim, what do you end up recalling doing?
From what I recall, taking a pulse, find out if there was still a pulse.
Were you able to find a pulse initially?
No.
So what do you recall happening then?
Then I started compressions, and as a team, we start doing what we need to as far as starting compressions, starting ventilations. The officer on duty that day starts filling out reports, or starts kind of taking like a timeline of reports and what we're doing at certain times.
And by compressions on the chest, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you're trying to get what with the patient?
We're trying to get a pulse back.
What do you remember happening?
I remember doing CPR. We were going through our process of resuscitation. At some point, we got a pulse. At that point, we helped the paramedic unit that was also on scene, both the victim into the back of the paramedic unit, and from there, the paramedic unit went to the hospital.
And which hospital, do you know?
I believe it was St. Luke's.
Do you recall how long medical treatment was being provided to the patient before you regained a pulse?
Before we regained a pulse?
Yes.
No, I don't.
Was it quick or was it long, or you just don't remember?
I just don't remember.
What's a radial pulse?
Radial pulses where it's taken on your hand.
Is that where you, when you're checking to see if you got a pulse, is that where you check, or do you check the neck?
You check a radial pulse, and you also check a for carotid pulse also.
You did not accompany the paramedics to the hospital, is that correct?
No.
You stayed at the scene, collected your stuff, and then left. Is that right?
Yes.
No other questions?
Thank you. Mr. Hart? Mr. Powell?
Good afternoon, firefighter DeFord. How are you?
Good, how are you doing, sir?
I'm well, thank you. So you were dispatched for a cardiac arrest, correct? That was the dispatch?
I believe so, yes.
All right, and that means the heart wasn't beating. That was the call, correct?
Yeah.
And when you got there, that's what you found. You said the victim, that's Mr. Acevedo, on the ground, correct?
Yes.
All right, and he's in asystole or his heart's not beating, correct?
Yes.
All right, and that can occur before breathing stops, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, cardiac arrest can lead to respiratory arrest,
Mhm.
right? It's just a yes or no.
Yes.
Okay. And vice versa, respiratory arrest can lead to cardiac arrest.
Yes.
All right. In any event, you begin measures to continue CPR, and you're able to get a pulse back around 8:01 a.m. Is that consistent with your recollection?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Sure. You got a pulse back from Mr. Acevedo, correct?
Yes.
Around 8:01 a.m. Is that consistent with your recollection?
Time-wise, as far as that, I do not recall.
Okay. And do you recall it taking some time to get inside because you and your colleagues took some time to don PPE, protective gear, before going into the home?
Yes, we did, because it was at the beginning of the COVID.
Right. Has that delayed you by just a couple of minutes? Is that right?
Probably just a minute or two, while we were down there, because I believe it was either gowns or we were wearing Tyvek suits at the time, depending on what the department provided for us.
All right. And so you get inside and begin assistance with Mr. Acevedo. And based on your experienced EMT as part of your job, right?
Yes, sir.
And you know that a symptom of cardiac arrest can be gasping, correct?
Yes.
Though you didn't hear any of that at that time, correct?
No.
Cardiac arrest had already taken some time prior.
Yes.
And when, you don't know.
No idea.
Okay, and you arrived at approximately 7:50, is that about right?
Time-wise, I don't.
Okay,
I can't answer to that.
okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Mr. Tiffin?
Nothing.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. DeFord. You can step down. Hold on. I just wanted to ask our media folks, can I have a word with you all? I'm a little concerned about the positioning of this microphone, so I'd like to meet with you and the attorneys just for a moment. Chambers? Folks, we're just waiting for the next witness. The concern the court had was there's a microphone that's a little close to the defense table for the court's comfort, but the media assures me it's not on. So we're not picking up any side conversations. That said, we'll be proceeding in just a moment. So we're off the record here for just a minute.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God, or under the pain and penalty of perjury?
Yes.
You can be seated, and please state and spell your name for the record.
My name is Natalia Halcomb, Nataliahalcomb.
Thank you, Ms. Holcomb. We'll start with Mr. Tiffin.
Ms. Holcomb, you were employed how?
I'm a firefighter for Milwaukee.
And you've been a firefighter for how long?
3 years.
Prior to achieving the rank of firefighter, you were also working for the Milwaukee Fire Department, correct?
Yes, I was a cadet.
And what's a cadet?
So a cadet is like a 2-year-long program where they send you right out of high school and you get all of your certifications like EMT, paramedic, Fire One, and it's pretty much like a stepping stone into becoming a Milwaukee firefighter.
In 2020, specifically in April of 2020, you were a cadet?
Yes.
And which station did you work out of?
Engine 33,
Which is where?
45th and Burnham.
On the morning of April 19th, were you working and were you part of the dispatch to a house on Cleveland?
Yes.
Your assignment that day was what?
I was right along, so I was pretty much going through getting my time as a paramedic. I was riding along on paramedic med units as a step for paramedic course.
Did the ride along just mean you observe, or do you also do things?
It was both, so observing and practicing skills.
And if you recall, what was the reason firefighters, paramedics were dispatched to this house?
It was for P&B, so pulseless and not breathing.
How did you get from your station to the house? I mean, what were you on? Fire engine? Were you in a med unit? Where were you?
Med unit. Med 14.
Pardon me?
Med 14.
Med 14?
Yes.
Med stands for medical, correct?
Yes, med is in the paramedic med unit.
You arrived, correct?
Yes.
This was the morning.
Yes.
You ended up entering a single-family home, is that right?
Yes.
And what did you do?
I had first arrived on scene and pretty much initiated giving the IO, which is a needle that goes into the bone to give medications.
So you're inside where the patient is, correct?
Yes.
Did you later learn that patient's name?
I'm sorry?
Did you learn the patient's name?
No.
The patient, though, is in, if you remember, what room?
The kitchen.
And are there other medical personnel and members of the fire department in there at that time?
So the engine had arrived first and they were already inside. So they were at the head of the patient at the time and already giving compressions.
And then you come in, and when you walk through the door, where are you?
I am at the foot of the patient, so that's where you would insert the IO. So right when you walk in, there is a side door, and I was right closest to the side door at the foot of the patient.
So the patient's feet were near this side door?
Yes.
You've testified you administered a drug, correct?
Yes.
And what's the drug?
Epinephrine. It helps to engage the electrical activity in the heart.
And that's administered where?
So how it was administered that day was through the bone. So you pretty much drill into the shin of the bone in order to get medication that way. Usually it would be sometimes if they can get an IV, but since we weren't able to get one at the time because he had been dead, we wanted to get the most effective, fastest way to get that medication to him.
Is this with a needle?
Yes, and a drill, essentially.
You administer the medication. What do you remember happening then?
After administering the medication, he was connected to essentially like a bag of saline to kind of help push fluids into the patient.
And what happened?
They continued CPR. They were bagging the patient as well. And we pretty much continued that cycle until pulses came back.
So at some point in time, a pulse is detected in the patient. Is that correct?
Yes.
Once the pulse is detected, what happens then?
We usually, if it's a larger patient, which in this particular scenario he was, so we tarp the patient, which we roll them on the side, slide the tarp underneath, roll them back, and then we lift them and carry them to a cot so we can get them loaded into the med unit.
And was the cot inside or was it outside?
Right outside.
The patient was put on the cot, is that correct?
Yes.
And then taken to the med unit you arrived in?
Yes.
Patient was put in the med unit?
Yes.
And what did you do?
So once I got into the med unit, I was assigned with continuing the ventilation, so bagging the patient and assisting his breathing.
And how is that done?
So you have a tube that goes pretty much down the patient's airway, and you connect a BVM, which is about this big, and you squeeze it in order to allow adequate breaths to go through.
So you're squeezing
A bag,
a bag.
essentially, yes.
And where's the patient transported to?
St. Luke's,
And you were part of that transport?
yes.
And at St. Luke's, what happens?
At St. Luke's, they're transferred care to the nurses, doctors on call at the time, and from there, we have no responsibility of what happens next.
Fair to say they take over and then your role is done and you
So
leave.
we wheel them into a designated room that is assigned for every person that goes through either private or med ambulance, and we can help transfer them to the cot inside the room, and then doctors and nurses will take over bagging. They will usually replace our bag with their own, and they will continue doing any other care that's needed.
Judge, no further questions.
Thank you.
No questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, Mr. Powell. All right, thank you, Ms. Helcom. You can step down.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God, or under the pain and penalty of perjury? May I have a seat and please state and spell your name for the record?
Ronald Stephen Lagash, L-A-G-O-S-H.
Yes, sir. We'll start with Mr. Tiffin.
You are employed how?
I'm an investigator with the District Attorney's Office,
You've held that position for how long?
10 years.
And prior to that, how are you employed?
I retired from the City of Brookfield Police Department as a detective.
You've been a detective with the Brookfield Police Department for how long?
Detective,
Or let me just make this, how long have you been employed by that department?
28 years.
On April 19th of 2020, did you become involved in the investigation of an incident involving a Milwaukee police officer named Michael Mattioli?
Yes.
At some point in time, the residence, 4502, later on was entered and photographs were taken. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And you didn't take the photographs, did you?
No.
You were inside the residence, though?
Yes.
You had an opportunity to see what's there.
Yes.
I'm not going to ask you to describe these, I'm just going to ask you to look at these exhibits 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, and just, do you recognize, they're all pictures, recognize what those are pictures of?
Do you want me to describe each one?
I just want to know whether, just look at them and recognize what they're pictures of.
Those are pictures of the Mattioli residence, the interior.
I'm going to put them on the monitor. From where you're sitting, can you see?
Can you activate that screen, please? Thanks.
Can you see by the monitor?
I can see that monitor, yes.
On the monitor right now, there's a picture, it's been marked Exhibit 4, correct?
Correct.
And what is that a picture of?
That is a picture from inside the residence in the living room, taking a picture of the front door.
Does that picture capture what you saw in that residence when you were there on April 19th, 2020?
Yes.
Exhibit 5 is another picture. You recognize what this is a picture of?
Yes.
What is that a picture of?
That is a picture of the stairway from the upstairs looking down, down the stairway.
Where I'm pointing, sort of at the bend, what did you observe there?
There was a lampstand, a tall lampstand, almost as tall as I am, giving an approximate height, that had been knocked over and into the wall, causing damage to the wall, and was laying on the floor.
Now put up another picture, it's marked Exhibit 6. What is that a picture of?
That is from the bottom of the stairs of the same lampstand and the stairwell.
Exhibit 7, what is that a picture of?
That is a picture of Mr. Mattioli's bed and items that were found on the bed.
And from you being in the house, Mr. Mattioli's bedroom was where?
As you went up the stairs to the second floor, it was on the right-hand side as you were going up the stairs.
Exhibit 8 is another picture. It's a picture of what?
That's the foot of Mr. Mattioli's bed, taking a picture of the items that were found on the bed.
Exhibit 9 is another picture of what?
Again, a picture of the bed, this time from the far side of the bed, looking down at the items that were found on the bed.
The items found on the bed, and specifically the dollar bill, they were all collected, weren't they?
Yes.
I'm sorry, they were
All collected.
collected. Thank you.
And the purpose of collecting them was what?
For evidentiary purposes.
Finally, this picture, which has been marked Exhibit 10, that's a picture of what?
So that's a picture of the living room. The person was with their back to the door that we saw, I believe, on slide 4, or item number 4, and they were taking a picture into the house facing towards the hallway that goes into the kitchen.
In the kitchen, as one's looking at that would be, as one's looking at the picture would be to the right, is that correct?
That is correct.
And from being in the house, you're aware there's a basement?
Yes.
How does one get to the basement?
Around the corner was a stairwell that went down to the basement.
So you go around what I'm sort of drawing here at this corner, is that correct?
Correct.
these 7 exhibits, do they all accurately reflect what you observed when you were inside 4502 West Cleveland on April 19th, 2020?
Yes,
Does the state's moving into evidence exhibits 4 through 10, and I have no further questions.
No objection.
Exhibits 4 through 10 are received and marked. And no questions from the defense?
Briefly.
Okay, Mr. Powell?
Investigator Lagash, part of your role here was also collecting digital evidence from the home, correct?
correct.
Which would include things like cell phones and computers, right?
Yes,
And you did that here. You collected several cell phones, right?
correct.
Including, well, strike that. When you do that, one of your purposes is to then go and sort of download the information on those items, be them cell phones or computers, and look at what's on there, right?
Correct.
You use special forensic tools to do that.
I do.
And one of the items you recovered that day was a phone belonging to Joel Acevedo, is that correct?
That is correct.
And you also used those forensic tools we talked about, one's called Celebrite, correct?
Correct.
And you were able to download the contents of Mr. Acevedo's cell phone, right?
Yes.
And you turned that into a lengthy report.
Yes,
That is, Celebrite generates a lengthy report of the contents of the phone.
it does.
And in this case, those contents of Mr. Acevedo's phone totaled around 14,000 pages or something like that, correct?
If that's what you're telling me, I did not look at the report before coming in here, so yes, it can be voluminous.
Right, but that wouldn't surprise you to hear a number like that. That's fairly common.
That is common.
Because what you're pulling off the phone is all kinds of data within the phone, from background data that uses to run apps to actual contents of people's communications, right?
Correct.
And that could be text messages, right?
Yes,
Or social media messages like Facebook, Instagram, things like that. All that comes through.
as whatever Celebrite can decipher, yes.
Okay, and it was able to do so in this case as it relates to Mr. Acevedo's phone.
Yes.
Okay, that's all I have for Investigator Lagash. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tiffin?
I have no further questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lagash. You can step down.
Judge, as we discussed, this may be an appropriate time. The next witness is Investigator Dallin. It will take a little bit of time.
Okay. All right. It sounds like this would be a good time for a break, everyone. So we're going to take a break. So we'll break for about 15 minutes, and then we'll be back on the record. It's 2:41, 2:42. Let's say about 2:55 or so. Okay. All rise, please. Everyone, please take your seats. Was there anything else for the record, Mr. Tiffin?
No, we just had a brief sidebar. It had to do with a microphone. The news professional said it's not working. I think that was it. And then we just discussed this would be appropriate time for a break.
Mr. Hart?
Nothing further. Thank you.
I agree. Okay, everyone, thanks. We're on break, recess for about 15 minutes.
15?
Yep.
Thanks. started.